Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Big Easy Sports Talk podcast. My name is Nick Garisco, and I'm here with Michael Pelicans. Today, we're talking NFL draft. We're going to be recapping round one. We're going to see how my mock did, how it fared against the expert. And we're also talking Pelicans. The Pelicans stole away trainer Aaron Nelson from the Suns, which I've heard is a pretty big deal. We'll get more into that. Thank you so much for tuning in, though. As always, if you like what you hear today, please subscribe to this podcast and give us a great rating on iTunes. You can follow us all over social media, any social media outlet, at B.E.S.T Podcast NOLA. We have an exclusive interview with Michael Mauti, if you haven't heard, and that will be coming out this week. And I think I'm going to save the Saints picks, my evaluation of the Saints picks, for Michael Mauti there. Okay, here we go. The NFL draft happened Thursday. Let's go through round one, Michael.
Yeah, let's do that, because I'm pretty curious to hear your thoughts, because I've never met anyone in my entire life who loves the NFL draft like you do. So what I want to do, Nick, is I actually want you to go through. We're going to go through each pick, and I just want you to give me some quick little hit on each individual pick. If there's a surprise or not, if you like the fit, if you like the player, etc. Does it work?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. All right, let's start off. So first pick, Kyler Murray to the Cardinals.
Yeah, that was pretty expected. ESPN tried to act like it wasn't a confirmed number one overall pick, but this was going to happen, and this was going to happen for the last few months. About 98% of mock drafts had this right, and pretty much everybody in the know that knew this one was coming. I like it for the Cardinals. I thought it was a good move getting the franchise changer there.
Okay. Nick Bosa to the Niners.
This was also a hit for me, so I was able to start the mock draft with, it's always nice to start, 2 out of 2 there, but it really didn't mean much to me because this was pretty chalky so far. Pretty much everybody got picks 1 and 2 right, so it didn't mean much. The Niners have taken defensive line 4 of the last 5 years in round 1. It was a pretty interesting stat there, yeah. But he was still the best player for them. I like the pick, and I like starting the draft 2 for 2, even though pretty much every expert did.
Okay. 3, Quinnen Williams to the Jets.
This was, we watched the draft together, Michael, and we actually talked about this. I was not sure about this one. This is kind of where the draft opened up. I thought that Quinnen Williams was likely to go number 3, but I had heard talks of Buffalo and Oakland wanting to move up right before the draft to take Quinnen Williams. So I had Ed Oliver here to the Jets for a long time. I was able to switch it to Quinnen Williams about an hour before the draft, but I wasn't exactly sure whether he was going to go to the Jets, the Raiders, or the Bills. I'm lucky I made the switch because the Jets ended up settling on Quinnen Williams. But to be honest, during the draft, I thought this was going to be this pick was going to be either Buffalo or Oakland trading up to 3. But it takes some luck every now and then. There's a 50-50 call for me between Ed Oliver and Williams, and I just heard the rumors about Buffalo and Oakland, and I decided to make the switch, and I'm glad I did. Most people did start 3 for 3, but a lot of people did. I would say not a lot. I would say probably about 40% of mockers did have Ed Oliver here, so it was the first kind of divisive pick.
Okay, well, speaking of divisive picks, let's go with 4, Cleveland Farrell to the Raiders.
Yeah, this was, like I said, Michael, you were there watching it with me, and I was kind of, the jaw hit the floor there. This was the first real huge surprise of the draft, and I'll be honest, I've been doing mock drafts and been studying this for, almost the last decade, I would say, and this is one of the biggest first-round surprises that I've ever seen in the draft, and I'm not just saying that lightly. This was a massive surprise. To be honest, I was a little disappointed in myself, though, because I had Farrell slotted to Oakland a few days prior to the draft because I read that Oakland was really high on him and they needed defensive end. Remember, Oakland had picks 24 and 27. I had Farrell. Yeah, I changed it because I thought Farrell was going to go a little higher. I did not think he was going to go 4 overall higher. I moved Farrell to pick 19 to the Titans. But I'm upset because, most mock drafts grade on accuracy on just getting the team right. And most people missed this pick, obviously, and nobody had him going to 4. Like, nobody even thought this was a possibility. It was a total shock. But I could have gotten a lot of points from an accuracy standpoint had I kept him at Oakland with pick 24. So I was a little upset with this. But, the story here isn't my mock. The story is obviously this was a massive surprise, one of the biggest surprises that I've ever seen in the draft. And basically nobody had this pick right. And nobody even had this pick as a possibility at 4.
Okay. So let's switch to our guy at LSU, Devin White, going to the Bucks.
Right. And this was the exact opposite as the Raiders. I'm sitting there watching the draft. Everyone's shocked by the Raiders. But Devin White was, I hit on this pick, and it was probably because this was the worst kept secret in the entire draft process was Tampa Bay's love for Devin White. I think I know we don't like seeing him twice a year. I know we don't like him going to a division rival, but I think it's a great fit for Tampa Bay. And I really do. I'm really high on Devin White. I think he's going to be a great player in this league for a long time.
Okay. 6, Daniel Jones to the Giants.
Yeah, that was another surprise. Not as surprising as Oakland, but Daniel Jones was the 4th-rated quarterback on a lot of teams' boards. Obviously, he was the top-rated quarterback on the Giants' board, and that's all that really matters here. The Giants, like Oakland, had more than one first-round pick. They had pick 17 as well. I got this pick correct. It was a hit technically because I had Daniel Jones going to the Giants at pick 17. So I got the points for it. A lot of mockers did. A lot of people knew the Giants' affinity for Daniel Jones. There was just a lot of connections there. They have the same QB trainer as Eli Manning. And the Giants just really loved Daniel Jones throughout the process, visited him with him a lot. And he's going to be Eli's successor there. I thought they were going to take a defensive player here. And because there's a ton of good ones on the board, particularly Josh Allen, and then wait on a quarterback for 17. But I personally, in my opinion, Michael, it's kind of a catch-22 because personally, I think Daniel Jones would have made it to 17, but you don't want to mess around with quarterback, right? Like if this quarterback was really their guy, I mean, you got to step up and reach for him, and that's what the Giants did, and we'll see if it works out. Their whole draft will be based on this pick.
Okay. 7, Josh Allen to the Jags.
Yeah, so nobody really saw this coming because nobody thought the Giants were going to take Daniel Jones at 6. So what happens is it moved premier defensive talent down on the board. Like Josh Allen, like for example, Cleveland Farrell and Daniel Jones going in the top 6 moved Josh Allen and Ed Oliver down to some lucky teams who did not expect them at all. And the Jaguars were one of them there. I had the Jaguars going O-line here because I didn't think Josh Allen would be available. But once Allen was available, it was an obvious pick for the Jaguars. He was the best player on the board. I know the Jaguars have a stacked defense, but you don't want to reach for a positional need and bypass the best player available when he's the top-rated player on your board, especially at a premium position like pass rusher. So I think the Jaguars did the right thing there, even though pretty much no mocker hit on this pick.
Okay. All right, so we got our first tight end off the board, T.J. Hawkinson to the Lions.
Right, and I'm going to talk about 3 draft regrets here as we go through the 32. I'm going to talk about 3 picks that I really regretted, kind of like 50-50 propositions for me that I guessed wrong on. And TJ Hawkinson was one of them. I had TJ Hawkinson to Detroit right here at 8 the day before the draft, and I ended up moving away from it. I even said in the mock draft, not only did I mention him as a target, but I talked about in my mock draft, how the Lions were rumored to wanting a tight end here and how Matt Patricia comes from New England, a team that wasn't shy about utilizing tight ends. All the writing was on the wall for this pick, but to be honest, a lot of experts did not get this right. Most experts had TJ Hawkinson going to Jacksonville or Green Bay or Cincinnati, but he goes to Detroit. It didn't hurt me too badly because, a lot of mockers didn't have it, but I was kind of kicking myself during the draft because it was my first real regret because, man, I really had TJ Hawkins in Detroit for a lot of the draft process, and I just changed out of it.
Okay. Ed Oliver to the Bills at 9.
Bills at 9. I had them going Jaywan Taylor here, and for those, I actually got a lot of questions from my friends. What happened with Jaywan Taylor? He didn't even go in the first round, Michael. But what happened was that he had he was medically flagged with a knee injury that was undisclosed to the public. So he fell out of the first round. So a lot of people really missed the boat on Jaywan Taylor. Ed Oliver here, great pick for Buffalo. Is actually a steal for Buffalo. Again, I just mentioned how Ed Oliver and Josh Allen were able to fall because of picks in the top 6. And Buffalo wanted Ed Oliver badly. And in fact, in my mock draft, I wrote the Bills could pounce if somehow Quinn Williams, Ed Oliver, or Josh Allen slides past the Giants. That's exactly what happened. I also said, direct quote in my mock, in fact, if there's any team that would trade up for a guy like Ed Oliver, it's the Bills. And the Bills didn't have to make that trade. They got lucky. So good fortune for the Bills there for Ed Oliver following at 9 overall.
Okay. Rounding out the top 10, Devin Bush to the Steelers.
Right, and this was a pick that I got correct. I had Devin Bush going to at pick 10 overall, but I did get the team wrong because the Denver Broncos traded out of this pick. I had Bush going to the Broncos at 10. The Pittsburgh Steelers moved to 10, and in my mock draft, it was, I wouldn't say it's totally predictable because the Steelers rarely ever do trade up. But I had in my mock draft, if Devin Bush, for the Steelers pick, I said if Devin Bush was available at pick 20, then this would be a sprint to the podium pick. I knew that the Steelers loved Devin Bush. I did not know that they were going to trade up all the way to 10. And I definitely didn't think Denver was going to give up that pick, but that's exactly what happened. I was lucky to get the pick right in terms of the pick, but I did not get the team right here. So it's kind of a half hit, if you will.
Yeah, it's funny, too, in the top 10, we had talked about this a few podcasts ago. You were talking about, I think the most important three positions you said were tackle, quarterback, and defensive end. And so we had, looks like, 3 defensive ends, 2 quarterbacks, and 1 tackle actually outside the top 10. But it just, to what you're saying, basically 5 of those top picks are coming from there. And 5 of them were defensive linemen as well, and that's kind of crazy.
Right.
So.
It was a stacked defensive line class, and you're exactly right. The top 10 just kind of reiterated the premium positions in this draft. And not even just in this draft, what's important in the league, quarterbacks and defensive linemen. And as we'll see later, a lot of offensive linemen are about to start getting taken.
Okay. So let's skip to 11. Jonah Williams going to the Bengals.
Right. I had Jonah Williams at 7 to Jacksonville, but again, I didn't know Josh Allen and Ed Oliver would be available. Some people did hit on this pick, though. Some people, in fact, Kat Terrell, former Saints beat writer, those of you who follow the Saints might recognize her name. She's now covering the Cincinnati Bengals. She was one of the few people to hit on this pick, so great call by her. Todd McShay also hit on this pick. I didn't think Jonah Williams was going to last this far, and I thought the offensive linemen were going to be taken a little earlier, but that wasn't the case. Anyway, great pick for Cincinnati, though. It was a pick I missed on because I had Jonah Williams going higher here. I had Brian Burns being selected here, and he got selected 16th.
Okay. 12, Rashawn Gary to the Packers.
This was a pick that surprised me. I had Rashawn Gary going 21st to the Seattle Seahawks. I didn't even list Rashawn Gary as a potential prospect for Green Bay, unlike Cincinnati, where a lot of these picks I didn't hit on. I at least mentioned them as a potential possibility for him. Not with Green Bay. This is a pick that I totally missed on, but thankfully a lot of the experts missed on it too. I don't know of any mock, and Michael, I'm looking at thousands of, I would say hundreds to be safe, of mock drafts before through the last 2 months. I don't think I saw one where Rashawn Gary was picked by Green Bay. And I saw a ton of different combinations, so nobody. I didn't really lose any points, replacement points, if you will, by this pick here. But yeah, very interesting boom or bust pick for Green Bay.
Okay, Christian Wilkins at 13 to Miami.
And this is when my favorite part of the draft started, Michael. This is when we started picking this draft and going outside to the projector screen, playing a little beer pong here. But this is actually when good fortune started going my way here. Christian Wilkins was not only a hit for me, but also a lot of people didn't really have this pick. I would say it was probably about 40% of them the experts did. And it also kind of set the tone for a great teens, as we're going to see throughout. So this was the first hit that I had, direct hit. I mean, I hit Denver's pick halfway where I got the right, I hit on pick 10, but the wrong team. But this was my first direct hit since pick to the Giants at 6. So it was nice to get this one. I was kind of feeling at this point that my mock wasn't that great, but fortunes were able to turn for me from this point going forward.
Okay. 14, Chris Lindstrom to the Falcons.
And this is when I knew I didn't have a really crappy mock after all. This is when I kind of had a real sigh of relief. If you recall, at our draft party, this is when I actually stood up and cheered. And no, it wasn't because the Falcons got a good player in Chris Lindstrom. It was because this was my favorite call of the entire draft. I'm not going to try to sit here and toot my own horn, but I did, I've looked at so many mocks throughout this process. There was only one other one that I saw out of hundreds that mocked Lindstrom to the Falcons. So this was a very important pick for me in terms of accuracy and in terms of matching up with the experts there. It was a pick that pretty much nobody had. So it was a pick really at that point where I'd only hit on a lot of picks that tons of experts did. Really, Wilkins was my only real surprise hit at that point. It was a pick that really helped me separate myself from the experts. So I was really pumped when the Falcons called Chris Lindstrom's name.
Okay. 15, Haskins to the Redskins.
Right. And this was an interesting pick because it was not only because it was a quarterback, but I gave a stat on my Facebook Live, my 3-hour Facebook Live that I do every year before the draft, where I kind of go 1 through 32 and talk about everything. I mentioned a stat there where in the last 5 years, 10 of the last 11 quarterbacks were not picked by the team at their spot, aka in other words, a team traded up for a quarterback in round one. I'll rephrase it. Out of 10 of the 11 quarterbacks taken in round one were taken by teams who traded up for them. I think that's an easier way to put it. And in this draft, the Giants did not trade up for Daniel Jones at 6 because, that was a huge reach in my opinion, but they didn't have to trade up. But the Washington Redskins were very patient here because a couple of teams could have taken Dwayne Haskins, but they waited for their guy, and the patience paid off. Nobody traded up for Dwayne Haskins ahead of the Redskins, even though it was heavily rumored that they were interested in Haskins, and they were able to get their guy there. So props to the Redskins for being patient. And props to me, I was able to hit this pick as well. So I was able to, at this point, I was hitting on 3 picks in a row with Wilkins, Lindstrom, and Haskins. And at this point, I'm starting to feel pretty good about my mock.
Okay. So 16, Brian Burns to the Panthers.
And this was my least favorite pick in the entire mock because this was one of these, how, you probably know in fantasy basketball, but also in fantasy football, how you're torn between who to start out of 2 guys and you just don't know who to do it. And at the last second you make a call and then the other guy goes off. Well, that's exactly what happened here. Brian Burns or Andre Dillard was my pick for the Panthers throughout this entire mock process, Michael. I'm talking about 2 months of constantly changing my mock, and it was always between Brian Burns and Andre Dillard. It was a 50-50 shot for me. I ended up going with Andre Dillard. And, of course, it was Brian Burns. So that was a pick that I easily could have had. Because, I don't get upset if there's like a pick where it's like, okay, he was a possibility, but I really wasn't probably going to end up with that guy there, Like if it was a long shot, even though I had him as a possibility, that doesn't upset me. It really upsets me when I'm like a coin toss away from Brian Burns or Dillard, and I miss on the pick just because, I guessed wrong. A lot of the draft is guessing, and I just happened to guess wrong here. But I was, as we'll see why in a second, I was really upset about this for a number of reasons.
Okay, 17, Dexter Lawrence to the Giants.
Yeah, again, I missed on this pick because I had Dexter Lawrence down in the late 20s. I missed on this pick because I had Daniel Jones here to the Giants. I thought they were going to go defensive lineman first and then quarterback, but they flipped it on everybody. They took their quarterback first and defensive lineman, which I guess in hindsight makes sense because quarterback is more important. I just didn't trust the Giants to do, the wise thing, I guess, if you will. I would even argue that it probably was wise in this case to go DL and then go quarterback because I don't think anyone was targeting Daniel Jones except for the Giants, but who knows?
Okay. 18, Garrett Bradbury to the Vikings.
This was another hit for me, but it was a hit for a lot of people there. A lot of people didn't know really where to mock Garrett Bradbury just because he's kind of an offensive guard. But Minnesota needed a guard, and it really was kind of that simple. It was a little more nuanced to it. He fits their zone blocking scheme under Kubiak really, really well, and that was something I took into account there. But most mockers just said oh, Minnesota needs a guard. Well, let me give them the best possible guard. And that pick ended up, the conventional wisdom there ended up paying off, and he was a hit at Minnesota 18. Good pick for them, too.
Okay. 19, Jeffrey Simmons to the Titans.
This is a controversial pick. It was a pick I missed on. I had Jeffrey Simmons going to the Green Bay Packers at pick 30, so this was a bit of a reach, a little higher than expected there. Remember, Jeffrey Simmons has two issues. The first was that he just tore his ACL while he was training through the draft process. So he's probably going to be redshirted, for lack of better words, to use a college term there. He's probably going to be redshirted his rookie year, not really play. So the Titans kind of took a little bit of a gamble there. But Michael, let's kind of pause for a second, because we were watching the draft together, and this was a very controversial pick, not only because of the torn ACL, but because, back in high school, Jeffrey Simmons was a player who, and it's not technically domestic violence because they weren't living together, but there was violence on a female, okay? And Jeffrey Simmons punched a female. I believe it was his girlfriend at the time, several times while she was on the ground. And we're seeing this more and more, unfortunately. Actually, I wouldn't say that's correct. We are seeing it more and more. I wouldn't say it's happening more and more. I would say that thankfully people are talking about it more, and it's becoming more of an issue that is prominent in society, which is great, of course. Now, is the NFL acting on this that much? Not really. They could be doing more, of course. But ESPN took a stance here. I mean, we were watching. They aired, before they even got into the football conversation about Jeffrey Simmons, they aired for about 10 minutes. All of the panelists were talking about his past abuse on that female, and the incident and the mistake that he made, and they really honed in on it in a way that I've never seen ESPN do, especially during a live telecast of the draft. I mean, we've seen people do specials on it or segments on it, like Outside the Lines, but during the draft, this was kind of unprecedented. And the other unprecedented part of it was they showed the video. And for Ray Rice, they didn't show the video on ESPN. For Kareem Hunt, they didn't show the video on ESPN. Now, you had to go to TMZ for that kind of stuff. So, Michael, we were watching this together, and this lasted for those of you who weren't maybe watching ESPN. Yeah, 8 to 10 minutes. This lasted a long time. Michael, I want to get your impressions on this. Did you like it? Did you dislike it? What would you think of this while you were watching it here?
I honestly didn't know what to think. I mean, I certainly agree with you that the domestic violence and the issue, I mean, again, this is maybe not qualifying as domestic violence, but it's violence in another way. But this issue's been so poorly handled by the NFL for so long. I mean, to see players getting away with what they're getting away with against women is insane. I don't, I know that it's no different from people who have a lot of money, who know good lawyers or whatever, getting away with the same kinds of things. But the fact that this is existing and that there aren't more serious repercussions has really colored my opinion of the NFL.
Right.
I think, I don't know how I feel about them showing it. I'm glad that it's becoming more of a conversation. I don't know if it's the right venue for it, but I don't know. I honestly don't know, but I know that I want something to change with the way that they're handling it. So if this is a step in that direction, that's great. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I love the last thing you said there, because, it does make you uneasy, and a lot of people even queasy watching these videos. And the shocking part to me wasn't that they brought it up. It was the length of time that they spent on it. They spent 10 minutes talking before they even mentioned him as a football player. And usually it's the reverse, unfortunately, right? Usually they talk about his football prowess first, and then they're like, oh, yeah, he had a domestic violence incident. And, that's kind of how it's been in the past. But, Michael, don't you think that if everything you're saying is right, where you want kind of people to take a stand on this, don't you think this was kind of the proper venue for them to actually kind of go, I wouldn't say off the grid here, because I would argue that it's kind of necessary, but for them to do something unprecedented and actually show the video of abuse on national TV during a program like the draft? And I think that this is kind of, I kind of thought it was good for society, right?
I think it's good if they address it. If it doesn't do anything, then I think it's another thing where we can talk about these things all we want when there's actually not action accompanying those, voicing this or bringing it up or displaying it, whatever you want to call it. I mean, to me, it's the action that I want to see. I'm tired of people getting away with it. And that's not just, again, this is a pervasive issue. This is not just in the NFL. This is everywhere. And this is, I can't believe that, I don't know. It really, honestly, it's just frustrating to me. And I hate to say that I don't have, a good articulate answer, but I want action, and I'm tired of them showing it and not doing anything about it. So I hope that there's some sort of response for this. There's pressure publicly or whatever it is, seeing this kind of stuff and saying the NFL needs to take a real stand on this, because it's always been a joke to me that the NFL has been so hard on the Saints, hard on other people for these things that are way less important in life than, men beating women. And that's my take on it.
Abuse is at minimum, it's a 6-game suspension at minimum under the new policy there that they enacted after the Ray Rice mistake there, and getting caught on your second drug offense, marijuana even, or substance abuse or whatever it is, or steroids or marijuana, is 4 games. So it just kind of sucks to see 4-game suspension for marijuana and sometimes only a 6-game suspension for potentially, for domestic violence. And I know I'm a lawyer. I get that you have to let these things play out in court. I get that the NFL's in a tough position because they have to make a judgment before all the facts come out, right? Because if they wait too long, if they wait for the courts to play it out, it's going to be years before this is settled. And the public that's not fair to, the woman who was abused. That's not fair to the fans. That's not fair to the player even, or the opponent. It's not fair to anybody if the player is just sitting there playing during that time when he actually is guilty of a horrible crime like Tyreek Hill the other day with a child abuse situation going on. I think that Tyreek Hill's situation with the child abuse is something that a lot of people are paying a lot of attention to. And I hate to say this, but I think one of the reasons they're paying attention to it is because it's affecting their fantasy teams. Tyreek Hill is one of the best players in the NFL, whereas Jeffrey Simmons is a defensive tackle for the Titans now. And Tyreek Hill may never play football again. At least that's what they're saying. But there is damning evidence on Tyreek Hill abusing his child. He actually broke his child's arm. Damning evidence that is out there, recordings and everything. And the Chiefs still have yet to cut this guy. It's been a week, Michael. It's been a week. They have yet to cut this guy. It's amazing. And I kind of am glad. It all ties in back to the Jeffrey Simmons and Titans at number 19 thing. I'm glad ESPN took a stand on it because I hope that the commissioner finds out about it. Because I hope that the NFL higher-ups, they're the people who have to do something. It should not be tolerated at all. You should never be able to lay your hands on a woman for any reason. And actually, it goes the same for women against men too. I always, as an attorney, as a family law attorney, I see it go the other way all the time too. Of course, it's more pervasive in the NFL, against women here. But men are abused as well. And you should never be laying your hands in a combative force or violence in any possible way. But we're going to stick to NFL here. And it was pretty shocking to me watching the draft. It's pretty shocking that ESPN really went on that long, 10-minute 10-minute segment about it. And I kind of liked it. I kind of felt a little bad for and this is no disrespect to the woman who was hit, because obviously, my thoughts and prayers are out for her. That should never happen. But I almost felt it got to the point where it was so unprecedented that they ended up announcing Denver's next pick at 20, Noah Fant. And they didn't even start talking about Noah Fant because they were still talking about the domestic abuse. But hey, if that's how it needs to be, then that's how it needs to be. Yep.
So, yeah, no, I'm glad we talked about it. We actually talked about it for about 10 minutes ourselves. So,
yeah, well, how hypocritical of us. But no, it's a good thing to talk about. It needs to be said because it's really unexcusable. I mean, it's ridiculous. And like you said, you definitely should be judging the NFL by the lack of response here. It just sucks that it takes a PR nightmare for the NFL to actually care and do something, right? It's horrible.
Yeah. Yep. So, well, hey, look, so let's get through these last, 20 to 32 pretty quickly here. So let's go with, I'll start pairing them up. So let's do Noah Fant and Darnell Savage to both the Broncos and the Packers at 20 and 21.
Right. Nobody really saw Noah Fant coming to the Broncos because a lot of people didn't have them trading down, of course. So this was a pick, of course, I missed on. I had Fant going to 27 to the Raiders. I thought I mentioned in my mock draft that Denver was one of the teams that could have traded down, but I didn't think it was going to be for Fant. With Green Bay at 21, that was a move up. They used the pick that we traded them for Marcus Davenport. They took Savage. That was another miss by me, except I had Savage at, I believe 29 to the Seahawks is where I had him at. I had him in the late 20s, so Green Bay took him there, so I missed on both Green Bay's picks.
Okay. All right, so let's do Andre Dillard and Titus Howard to the Eagles and the Texans.
Yeah, and this is a good pairing here because these picks are definitely related because the Texans desperately wanted Andre Dillard to fall to them, and I don't think they could even believe that Dillard was falling. And then the Texans were going to be able to take Andre Dillard because the Ravens, who had picked 22, didn't need a tackle. So the Texans were probably banking on that and sitting there saying, okay, the Ravens aren't going to take Dillard, so we're going to get, the guy who's the number one rated tackle on our draft board, and that's, confirmed. That was a fact. And they were probably sitting there, about to throw their arms up in the air and cheers. But then the draft is the draft, and if you really want a player, you got to move up for him, and that's exactly what the Philadelphia Eagles did. They need a successor for left tackle Jason Peters, so they traded up with the Baltimore Ravens from 25 to 22, and they took Andre Dillard. I was shocked Dillard fell this far. I had him actually going to pick 8 overall to the Panthers, but the Eagles swooped in front of the Texans and stole him right before the Texans. Oh, yeah, that was actually pun. Usually people intend their puns. I actually did not intend that. But the Eagles did swoop in, and they stole Dillard from the Texans, and I'm sure the Texans were furious after that. And as a result, they had to take a player who was probably a mid-second round prospect, but he was the next best left tackle on the board, and that's Titus Howard. They just weren't aggressive enough. They should have traded up. That's kind of a lesson. You trade up. If you want a guy that much who starts falling, you need to trade up even with the team that you don't think is going to be picking because you never know when another team is going to do it. So the Texans learned a valuable lesson there, I would hope. But anyway, this Titus Howard, back to the mock, this was a pick that I actually had a week ago. I was pretty set on Cody Ford going here, and I did miss on this pick. But I had Titus Howard as a potential prospect for the Texans just in case they lost out on all the offensive linemen. And that's exactly what happened here. So I'm only a little mad that I changed it from Titus Howard a week ago.
Okay, so we got some skill position guys here. Josh Jacobs and Marquise Brown to the Raiders and the Ravens. I don't know if I said that right, but
right, yeah. And there are very few and far between the skill positions where this is Josh Jacobs, the only running back taken in round 1. Most people did get this right. Most mockers did get this right. Very popular match to the Raiders. As for Marquise Brown, I had him going to the Eagles at 25. This was the second pick in this draft that I had the right pick here, but the wrong team because of a trade. So the Eagles were. I think the Eagles probably would have taken Marquise Brown. Not to say what I'm saying is going to be right, but I was pretty. If I had to rake all my picks in confidence, I was pretty confident about that happening. But unfortunately for me, Andre Dillard fell, and the Eagles had to make a move for the prominent player, and so that messed up my mock, and or that at least caused me not to have a hit. But I was lucky to hit on Josh Jacobs, even though a lot of people had him, and I was even lucky to get Marquise Brown in this right pick, even though it was the wrong team because of a trade out.
Okay, so we got 26 and 27, Montez Sweat to the Redskins, and then Jonathan Abram to the Raiders.
Right. So Montez Sweat, I had him going to Detroit at 16. He had a heart condition, so it was just tough to figure out where he was going to land in this draft. He was probably a top 10 talent in this draft, but the heart condition was going to push him down. I thought it was only going to push him down. I actually had him out of my first round for a while. But then I heard reports that the heart condition wasn't as serious, so I moved him up to 16 to Detroit. The Washington actually traded up for him at 26. They had to they traded back into the first round to get him, so they obviously cleared him from a medical standpoint. Jonathan Abram, I like this pick a lot, not just because I think he's going to be a good player to the Raiders, but also just because I had Abram going to in my mock at 26 here to the Colts. So I was able to get some accuracy points on him being within 2 pick. However, even though it was the wrong team there, however, the reason I liked it a lot was because not a lot of mockers had Jonathan Abram in their first round at all. So it was able to be another pick for me that I at least got in my first round where other mockers did not. So I enjoyed that pick.
Okay, so we got 28 and 29, Jerry Tillery to the Chargers, and then L.J. Collier to the Seahawks.
Right. I had Tillery there for San Diego. I'm still doing that for the Los Angeles Chargers for several different times in April, but I was never married to it. So I switched him out just as many times as I put him there. I wish I would have kept him in round 1. I thought he was going to be an early day 2 pick, but he ended up going late round 1. For the Seahawks, I know that Cleveland Farrell was a huge surprise to the Raiders, but in terms of second biggest surprises in round 1, I would say 29, Collier to the Seahawks was a huge surprise. Most people had him as a late second round pick, and nobody was even listing him as a possible pick to the Seahawks, even though they had 2 first round picks. And nobody I saw no expert was listing him as a possible first round possibility in general. So this was a pretty, very surprising pick.
Okay, so we got let's get the last 3 together. So DeAndre Baker to the Giants at 30, Caleb McGarry to the Falcons, and then you gotta help me with this guy's name to the Patriots. What's his name?
N'Keal Harry.
N'Keal, okay, Harry. Yeah,
right. So I want to say one more thing about the Seahawks. We were watching the draft, and I think that I mentioned while we were watching it, I was like, the Seahawks, at that point, they had picks 29 and 30 in a row because of trade downs. And I was like, the Seahawks do not want to make this pick here. You can just tell because they're taking all the way to the last second on both their picks. So they're just waiting for a team to call them and trade them. And it kind of makes sense now that they took L.J. Collier at 29. It kind of makes sense there because obviously they felt like they could have moved down and got him. But hey, in order to move down, you got to find a trade partner who wants to move up with you, and they just couldn't find one. For the Giants, they ended up finding a trade partner for their second pick in the first round at pick 30. The Giants traded up with them to take DeAndre Baker there. Not really foreseeable in my opinion. DeAndre Baker, a lot of people did have him in their first round. I did not, so I missed on that. But nobody really could have predicted that the Giants were going to trade back into the first round and take him, so I wasn't too concerned about it. The Falcons also traded back into the first round with the Los Angeles Rams. Interesting, I could have had this pick right because it could have been another mocked correctly to the pick, but not to the team. Because I had McGarry here for the Rams for a while. I ended up moving out of it, but the Falcons ended up trading up and took their second offensive lineman in the first round. They're really trying to solidify and fortify that offensive line and protect Matt Ryan. They allowed 45 sacks last year, which is the most in Matt Ryan's career. But nobody really had that pick right. And then N'Keal Harry, lastly, this is always great to end your draft on a hit. It sends you going to bed with a nice smile on your face. And this was I knew that I had, 10 hits at this point, and I knew that a lot of other experts were around that range. But this was a pick that was really able to put my draft, either tied on top or near the top, depending on how you grade mock drafts. And this was a pick that really not a lot of people had at all. I think there was only 1 or 2 other mocks that I saw that had N'Keal Harry here. So this really just kind of put a smile on my face before I went to bed, that I was able to hit on this pick and kind of, left in my mouth with a sweet taste. So I really like this N'Keal Harry pick to New England here.
Okay. Yeah, so let's talk about, now that we've gone through the entire first round, let's talk about, you've mentioned this several times about how they grade, how people mock, and like what kind of statistical techniques they're using and which ones are appropriate. So, I mean, tell me a little bit about the one that you usually refer to.
Well, there's 2 there's one really popular one called the huddlereport.com, but it's a little basic. And I know you being a statistician will agree with me. Their formula for grading picks is you get 2 points for matching the team and the player, okay? And you get 1 pick for just if the player just went in the first round in general and you predicted them to go in the first round. And that's it. That's it. They have no other grading scale, which I think is crazy. And that's actually the most popular grading system. So on the Huddle Report, I was actually tied for first this year of all the Huddle Report drafts in the entire nation, which I'm obviously very, very proud of. And I can't sit here and say it without sounding like, a boastful bragger or anything like that.
Just a tie, huh? You just tied.
Yeah, just a tie, right. No, I'm obviously very, very proud of it. I obviously put a lot of hours into researching, dude, and I take this stuff very, very seriously, arguably more seriously than, other than my wife. I probably take it more seriously than anything else in my life. So this is something that means a lot to me, and I was really happy to be tied according to that metric or according to that grading system, tied on the most popular website grading because I was able to have 11 team matches, and then I had 27 picks that were mocked in the first round. So I had 5 players that I didn't mock in the first round at all that I missed on. But that 27 and those 11 team matches were able to tie me in first with a guy named Ben Standig, who actually is a top 5 or 6 mocker like me, like probably in the nation, like throughout the years, like consistently always near the top. So Ben Standig and I had the best mocks according to the Huddle Report scoring. But there are other ways to do it, right? I mean, you don't want to only look at just team matches and whether the guy was a first rounder or not. Obviously, I think the logical thing to do it is how close were you on picks, And there's different websites that I've seen that have tried to start something up, but nothing really firm. The Blogging the Boys website, which is, yes, that stands for Cowboys, but they did a good job of analyzing mocks from 2015 to 2017, and they analyzed all the experts. I'm talking like at least 100, I think. And they had a rating system that gave 4 picks to a team match. Okay, so if you hit on the pick with the team, you got 4 points. If you hit on if it was within 2 picks, you got 3 points. If it was within 3 picks, you got 2 points. And if you mocked the guy in the first round in general, like you put him in the first round regardless of where you put him in the first round, but if you had him in the first round and you win in the first round, it was 1 point. But you could only get one of those things. So like, for example, if you were 3 picks, for example, if you got a team match, you don't get the team match plus the fact that you had him in the first round. You only get one of the 4 criteria, right? So on the Blogging the Boys website, I got 68 points on that. And that was also, even though I haven't tallied all of the experts, that was actually the highest. I've tallied the top 10 in terms of accuracy for the last 5 years. Lock Ford, Charlie Campbell, Daniel Jeremiah, Todd McShay, Ben Standig, Evan Silva. For the last 5 years, a lot of the guys who ranked top 10, and that was the highest from that standard, the 68 points there. Charlie Campbell, had 63 points there. Daniel Jeremiah had 65 points. But there are a variety of different ways that you can kind of grade these mocks. But those are the 2 systems that I kind of grade myself on. Just because the data is there available. I don't have to keep looking for other people's mocks and grading it. And also, it's just kind of an easy-to-use system. But I do wish there was a system that was, a little less, that could kind of take the whole picture into account. I think that, getting matched with the team is very important, of course. But I also think, getting the pick right in case the team in case they traded out of that pick. That happened to me twice where I got the pick right and the team was wrong. And I only got, I don't get that right in terms of team matches. I don't get points for that. So a formula that would do that would be great. And then also, I like the idea where if you're close to picks, then, within 2 or within 3, I like the idea that you're awarded partial points there. And I also even like the first round idea where you get like at least a point for mocking the guy in the first round, because I do think a big part of this is predicting who's going to go in the first round. So I know you're a math guy, and I know you're into stats, and I also know that you've done your fair share of homework on this. So what do you think about the systems out there, and what would you kind of suggest?
I think it depends on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to see who's the best talent evaluator, then it really doesn't matter which teams are drafting these players, right? So if you're saying,
definitely not.
So it depends entirely on your agenda, and I think that's
I would never ever even. I compete with Mel Kiper and Todd McShay and stuff like the ESPN guys for mocking, but I would never. Just to be clear to the audience, I would never claim that I'm even like a tenth of the talent evaluator that they are. I would say even 100th, honestly. I don't know I don't have a binder of all these players that go like the top 400 players in the draft. Like, I only care about mocking this draft. And there's a lot to be said for these guys who are their job is to actually evaluate talent. That is not my job, and that's not something I even try to do. So I just want to be clear that, although I do have some of the top mock drafts in the world, I don't hold a candle to these guys on evaluating talent. And you're right, Michael. Evaluating talent has really nothing to do, or very little, I should say, very little to do with actually getting picks correct in a mock draft.
Well, I think too, again, it depends on what your goal is. And unfortunately, what I think sometimes people don't understand about statistics is like all the systems that you're talking about are somewhat arbitrary. And again, that these statistics aren't meant to solve everything. Like it's meant to shine light on certain things. So, like, for instance, variance would be a big thing for me. I would want to see how close you are in your picks to where they actually got picked. And so it's not necessarily about the teams in those cases. It's about kind of slotting someone within a certain range. And are you getting consistently close? You had talked about the Raiders kind of going out of left field and picking someone much earlier than most people anticipated. So, again, it just depends on what you're trying to do here. But, certainly, if, let's just say, there are all kinds of different systems and each has its own credibility, then if you're finding some sort of, consolidation of all of those and you're saying, well, Nick Briscoe is second in this one, fourth in this one, sixth in this one, and then all of a sudden he's at the top at every single one, you start seeing some patterns, right? And that's where you can say, it's not clear cut and say, oh, well, if you average those together, it's, Nick's better than this person, but you're getting a nice picture of who performed consistently well, regardless of the metrics that were put in place. And I think that's the way that I would probably look at it if I were trying to figure it out.
Yeah, it's hard to all quantify this into one number or one metric. But if I had to make any suggestions, if you were able to form some type of spreadsheet, if we were able to create some type of spreadsheet document, which, by the way, a formula for grading mock drafts is absolutely needed. Like, I'm not the only one that expresses displeasure with the arbitrariness and the rigidness and the strictness of the Huddle Reports mock draft, where if you don't have the match, you just get one pick for mocking him in the first round and that's it. Like, experts out there do want a system that they can follow. So there is a market for this if you want to, get on those Excel sheets there. But I would say after doing this for a long time, and I'm not even just trying to be biased by it, but just after doing this a while and figuring out what I think is important in terms of grading accuracy, I would say, some kind of point system where you're given probably, let's just say, a certain amount of, let's just say 5 points for hitting the team, matching the team correctly, regardless of the pick. I would say 4 points if you match the pick, but you get the wrong team. And then I would say maybe 3 points if you're within, 2 or 3 picks, depending on whatever. And then I would say, 1 point if you mock them in the first round and they go in the first round. And then 0 points if you just miss on the first, if the guy just doesn't go in the first round. And then I would have some kind of separate cumulative variance kind of thing that judged how, kind of some one number that added up to a point value maybe, that kind of judged the variance of how far away you were from the picks that each year, that you could kind of make into one number that you could also make a point value. So that way, I know the point value is arbitrary, but people want I think people who are looking at it easily want some type of score. You know what I'm saying? But I do think the score should take into account the variance, like you're saying. It's taking into account matches, where, like how close you were to certain picks, how many first rounders you had. It should take into account everything, and there needs to be a formula out there. Hey, there's a market for it, Michael. I'm telling you, like there really is. And I know I did really well this year, but I got to say I've already had nightmares about Brian Burns, to Carolina there, because after seeing that I'm tied with Ben Standig for the top mock in the nation, I know I'm just one pick away from winning. And, that Burns pick, that 50-50 coin toss that I had, not only does it really, kill me that, now I got to say I'm tied, of course. We joke about it. But, I mean, of course, it's an accomplishment. But not only do I have to tie now, but also, I don't know if you noticed, but when we were going through the mock, picks 13, I hit on pick 13, 14, 15, and then 17 and 18. So I would have been able to say that I hit on 6 picks in a row, which I've never seen done before. But then Brian Burns kind of messed me up there. So that's kind of a shame. But yeah, to get back to the point here, there's definitely a market for this kind of thing. And you can also, guys, if you're listening, you can go on BigEasySportsTalk.com. And if you click the mock drafts, I've updated the spreadsheet. This spreadsheet is awesome. Michael might make another spreadsheet, maybe makes this new draft ranking formula that we're talking about here. But this spreadsheet that I've created is awesome. It goes through my mock draft history all the way dating back to 2002. It literally gives every single pick I made, and it color codes them based on whether it was a hit, whether it was within 2 or 3, whether it was a non-first rounder, that's a red, whether it's a green or a hit. And it gives you the numbers for every single draft. It gives you a key. And it also has a chart on how I fared against Mel Kiper and Todd McShay. I know that the 2 most popular guys. And then it has the stuff that we just talked about. It has the top 10 rankings on Blogging the Boys scoring in the last 5 years, the average. And then it has the top, the Huddle report that we talked about, the top 12 rankings there. Their average, their 5-year average. So you're not just looking at 1 year, but it does break down their score by year. So you can see who is the best for each year. And yeah, this is something that's definitely worth your time if you're interested in, mock drafts and just kind of, if you're interested in seeing who I mocked in, 2004 to the St. Louis Rams. You want to find out where I had Johnny Manziel going? I had him going to the St. Louis Rams in 2004. You can see how the league would have changed if the Saints would have taken Xavier Rhodes in 2013 like I wanted them to. But no, I'm just joking. But anyway, you can check out my mock history by going to BigEasySportsTalk.com, mock drafts, and then you can click on mock drafts, and then you can click on the Excel document or the article that talks about grading myself against the experts. I was going to do the Saints pick today, but I don't think we have time to go into all of that. The podcast is running long. Let's talk about the Saints pick when we have an exclusive interview with Michael Mauti, actually, and I got to plug that. My producer's begging me to plug that. We have an exclusive interview with Michael Mauti, if you haven't heard, and that will be coming out this week. And I think I'm going to save the Saints picks, my evaluation of the Saints picks, for Michael Mauti there, so we can jump to the Pelicans with Michael here. And Michael, I know the NBA playoffs are going on, and I know the Pelicans aren't in it. But, let's forget my mock drafts here. We've had enough of my mock here. The Pelicans have made some waves in the NBA circles this week. Michael, what does it mean that we stole away the Suns trainer, Aaron Nelson?
I think it means a lot. To me, one of the biggest things about building a successful franchise is what kind of organizational health that you have. And I think hiring Griffin, I was obviously expecting good things, but I think as one of his first items on his agenda, or whatever you want to call it, is to go after Nelson. I think that's huge. And Nelson's been there. I want to say he was there since 1993. So Aaron Nelson has a reputation in the industry as someone who can take players who other people are writing off for injuries or for whatnot, and basically go in there and revise some sort of, the way that they run or whatever, like loosen a hip flexor, whatever that might be, and basically get their careers to be longer. And that's a pretty big deal. So he did it with Shaq, Steve Nash, Grant Hill, and this guy is very, very well regarded in NBA circles. And the fact that, we poached someone who's been there since 1993, I'm sure we're not the first to get him or to go after him. I think that's amazing. And to me, look, we can talk all day about players and getting a draft pick like Anthony Davis certainly changed our franchise's course. But at the end of it all, you have to get so many things right to win a championship or to compete consistently. And that starts at the top. And that starts with your decision makers, your talent evaluators, and all of those things. And the fact that we're going out and he's getting the money to go after someone like Aaron Nelson, that is getting the organizational support to be doing something like that, I think it speaks volumes. And I don't get excited about a lot at this point. I would call myself more of a pessimist with the Pelicans, but I think this is a great move, and I'm excited. I really am.
The Pelicans have had so many injuries in the last, I would say, 7 years, I guess. I'll say during the AD era, but it could be even before then. But the Pelicans, would you agree that the Pelicans are one of the most injured teams like in the last couple of years? I mean, it seems pretty obvious to me, but is that something that a lot of teams are dealing with, or have the Pelicans had some really bad injury luck?
I mean, I guess it depends on it's hard because you have to consider the players and their histories, whether or not they were hurt other places. Was it a freak injury? I think we had actually spoken about that on a podcast. I think throwing all of that aside, all nuance aside, and just looking at how many games the Pelicans have missed in the last few years due to injury, I can say pretty comfortably that the Pelicans are near the top of that. So this is a big deal. Yeah, and I think too, like, to me, what this is really exciting is one, David Griffin. We talked about Griffin a little bit the last podcast or the podcast before, but the fact that Griffin's been out of the game for a couple of years now, I'm sure he had other opportunities. The fact that he chose the Pelicans, the fact that he wants to build something here, I think is really great. Obviously, there's a lot of work to be done. I'm not going to sit here and say that, oh, well, now we're in a great position or whatever. But, I mean, I think the Davis thing is a lottery ticket that Griffin's just sitting on. And I think he's building up a really great staff here. I'm looking forward to whoever he surrounds himself with. And this could be something. I think this could be really good. And I'm looking forward to seeing how it plays out.
So a lot of people don't realize, people who don't, I would even say fans of sports, a lot of fans don't even realize that when a GM comes in, almost the house is pretty much cleaned. Like, not only is the slate clean, but I'm talking about people lose their jobs with new tenures, new regimes coming in. GMs come in and they don't just say, oh, okay, what are we working with here? Okay, I want to do things this way and this way. No, a lot of GMs don't do that. A lot of GMs don't coach other people. They want their guys or their women there, and they want their people that they've worked with in the past to come in and take other people's jobs. So a lot of people don't realize that when a new GM is hired, people lose their jobs. And what's so important about this is that when a new GM comes in, you're not just getting a new GM, right, Michael? You're getting a new. Sometimes you get a new coaching staff, but you're at least getting some new assistants. You're at least getting new scouts. You're at least getting new area guys, player development guys. All kinds of jobs, all kinds of people are coming in with this new GM. So talk about the importance here with a GM kind of building the front office the front office kind of building their staff.
I think it just comes down to you have to trust the people below you, and that's in anything. That's not just in sports. I mean, you have to be able to delegate responsibility. You have to trust that the people under you are going to do their jobs, and like you're talking about, you want to get the right kind of people in this position so that they can do exactly that. I think if you look at, again, the draft is a crapshoot. So just because you're drafting in the top 10 does not mean you're going to get a great player at all in the NBA. They're really, if you think about it too, there are 30 players drafted in the first round in the NBA. There's a top 5, players might play 10, 12 years. You're looking for a really good player. If you get a superstar, that's amazing. But you're not always guaranteed that. So you have to, not just the decision makers, but he can't watch. There are so many players, not just in the NBA, but abroad, in college. You have to have a handle on all these guys, and there's no shortcuts. So there's no, you can't you have two eyes. You can't sit there and watch every single player in the entire world. That's just not realistic. So you have to have other people out there that you trust to do scouting. I think knowing your blind spots is really important. I think knowing the blind spots of the people around you is really important. And all of these things just speak to, if you want to build a great organization, you really have to trust other people around you. And like you're saying, that's the building out the staff. And that's what's happening right now. And I think that's going to give us a great indication to what Griffin wants to do with this franchise.
Back to Aaron Nelson here. So this is a David Griffin hire here. And this is one of the first things that he's done as GM. And, I want to get this straight first. Is Aaron Nelson what is it? Is he an athletic trainer? Is he a doctor or what's going on there?
That's correct. So he's an athletic trainer.
So he's an athletic trainer. And is he seen as the top athletic trainer in the NBA or one of the top?
Yeah, he's definitely one of the tops. I mean, I don't know, again, I don't know enough about that kind of stuff to speak to specifics, but I know that, he's...
Had you heard Aaron Nelson's name before? Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, this guy's a big deal. This guy's not like some guy that I had to look up after the fact. This is a guy who has, again, he's been there since 93. He actually was kind of coming up in the Suns organization right when Griffin was. And this guy has a really good reputation. This guy's legit.
Right. That means a lot to me that you actually heard about this guy prior to the move here. Because how many other athletic trainers for NBA teams do you know their name? I mean, that's kind of a rarity there. So I only know like 2 or 3 NFL doctors. So or team doctors. So it's just, these guys don't, grow on trees. And it's just very important for a team that has been hurt so often. And hey, building a championship team is like building a puzzle, and it feels good that we're getting this piece kind of put in place when we know Aaron Nelson is going to be, great at his job. And it's a really important job in the NBA. It's an 82-game season. And that'll wrap up this week's local episode. Thank you so much for listening. And make sure you become one of our best friends by subscribing to this podcast and giving us a great rating on iTunes. You can follow us on all social media at Best Podcast NOLA. And remember, this week we will be interviewing an exclusive interview with Michael Mauti, former Saints player and just great Louisiana guy. We'll be back next week with the interview with Michael Mauti. Tell all your friends, who dat?